Welcome back from the coffee break. How are we feeling? How are we feeling? All right, I think I'm going to ask us to stand up just for a quick refresher. All right, this is going to be a short exercise where you breathe in for 30 seconds, breathe out, breathe in and hold your breath, and then breathe out. So let's try this and see if we can hack it. If you have any health issues, please take a sit. All right, so let's breathe in and breathe out. And breathe in and hold your breath. And breathe out. All right, I think that's good enough exercise for the environment. But in between, think about if you didn't have the air while you held your breath, where were you going to breathe out? All right, let's have a sit. And welcome to this session where we're going to have a high-level panel. And we've got guests that we didn't have earlier, or at least we hadn't spoken earlier. And one of them is Mette Wilkie, who is the United Nations Environment Director for Ecosystems Division. She is going to be in the place for Eric, and that is the Executive Director for UN Environment, and she's going to be taking his place. We also have Dr. Abbas Gulet of the Kenya Red Cross Society. He's also joining us on the high-level panel, and he's going to be sharing his views as well in regard to disaster as well as environment. And we have speakers that we have not had as well still on the high-level panel. That is Gabriela Weinmann, and that is the Regional Director for East Africa and Yemen, the Norwegian Refugee Council. Thank you all so much for making time to take part and share views in regard to the conversation. But before we can even kick off this conversation, there's a video we'd like to show you, so pay attention and focus on your screens so we can show you this video before we get into the conversation. Oh, thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take a quick reintroduction of our guests. And from the extreme left, we have got Dr. Abbas Gulet, who is the Secretary General for the Kenya Red Cross Society. He is going to be sharing his views. He's got decades of experience in emergencies as well as disaster management. And right next to him, we've got Gabriela Weinmann, who is the Norwegian Refugee Council Regional Director for East Africa as well as Yemen. And she has also got extensive experience experience through her work in the field in various countries across Africa and Asia. And prior to joining the NRC, she was working with UN OCHA as head of the East African office. Thank you so much for joining us. And we also have Jesper Lund, who is the Chief Emergency Services Branch, UN Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. He was with us in the opening session as well. And we have Mette Wilkie, who is the UN Environment Director for Ecosystems Division. Thank you all so much for joining us. Now, of course, our focus is on particularly an issue that has to do with the environment as well as humanity. And we're talking about environment for humanity. There's quite a lot that we can talk about, but the agenda is for humanity and what we can do as people in positions of leadership, as people in different levels that we are at in our different countries, and of course sharing more of what can be done, where the challenges are, and what our speakers here have observed over the years in regard to what needs to be done. But of course we can agree that there is sort of a challenge when it comes to humanity, and of course the fact that we need to build peace, not just in our countries, but around the world, for the environment to be protected, for the skirmishes of climate change to be reversed, and of course for us to move forward or forge forward with development. There needs to be certain approaches that we need to take, and there need to be people who are spearheading these conversations. And these people are you and I, as well as the rest of the people around the world. So this now, of course, begs the question, do we agree that there is a divide between humanity, peace building, environment, and development approaches that we are having around the world, that we are seeing? Do we agree that there's a divide? By show of hands, maybe? Yeah, those who agree that there is a divide, well, it's just half of us, or maybe a quarter of us. The rest of us don't think there is a divide, I guess. But there are certain questions that need to be asked when we talk about the environment and humanity. So I'm going to pose my first question to Mette Wilkie, who is the UN Environment Director for Ecosystems Division. You play a huge role when it comes to the environment and your duties as well. What are some of the steps that you are taking towards increasing the understanding of the role of the environment in the humanitarian actions?
Thank you very much, and good morning to all. I'm very pleased to be here today. Well, let me just take one step back, because I think it's worthwhile just recalling that the environment, of course, is a victim of wars, conflicts, disasters. When they happen, there's often a very strong adverse impact on the environment and the natural resources. It can also be a cause of conflicts, or one of the contributing causes to conflict, to migration and therefore conflict happening after that. Bad management, unequal access to it can also be a factor. And of course, it is a solution too. I mean, we can use the environment, we can use the natural resources to build back better in a way that's much more sustainable. We can use natural resources to also generate trust between warring factions. We can use it to create green jobs. There are many opportunities as well. So we need to keep all of those in mind. So what do we do? Why are we actually dealing with it within UN Environment? Because prevention is so much better than cure. We really need to see that the only way that we can prevent disasters, emergencies, even conflicts and wars from happening is to look at the role that the environment and natural resources play. So we do that by looking at how can we increase resilience? And we're talking about environmental resilience, we're talking about ecosystem restoration, better and sustainable management of natural resources, but we're also talking about social resilience, making sure that people are aware of the issues, that we build the capacities to deal with emergencies, that we build the capacities to have better warning beforehand, and that we have equitable access to the natural resources. And clearly we're talking about economic resilience as well, making sure that people have sustainable livelihoods, making sure that they have insurance in place when some of these emergencies are happening. So those are the aspects we deal with in terms of the prevention and the resilience. And we want to make a strong focus on that. But we also, when we're dealing with the environment, obviously are involved when disasters and emergencies happen. So we help go in and look at, make sure that they don't get worse, that whatever we do at the first action doesn't affect the quality of the water, that we look at what are some of the risks that are out there, how can we assess them and deal with them, and clearly then linking it to the longer term recovery, and as I said, to build back better in a way that we look at how can we make it more sustainable going forward, how can we help increase that resilience, be it through ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction, ecosystem-based climate change adaptation. So there's a lot of interactions here, as you can hear, between the environment and humanitarian actions, which is why we think that UN Environment and other environmental organizations have a role to play here. And let me just mention sort of 5 areas where we're really working on that. So first, we work with the other UN agencies. As I hope all of you know, we have a joint unit together with the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, based in Geneva, that looks particularly at environmental aspects of humanitarian action. We also work with the peacekeepers to make sure that we sort of green the blue helmets, make sure they have a smaller environmental footprint when they're out helping out after there has been a conflict. And we try to make awareness among the other UN agencies to see what are these aspects, what's this interplay between environment, conflicts, disasters, and emergencies, and how can we all work together to help prevent this and reduce the risks of that. We work also with the mediators. We have been working with the African Union, the mediators, and looking to see how we can better equip them to take into account natural resources and natural resources conflicts in their mediation of such conflicts, particularly here in Africa. And we work with experts such as yourselves and with the civil society to create awareness through, for example, this forum that we have here. But we also work with the general public in terms of doing massive open online courses. We had one on disaster risk reduction a couple of years ago and had 13,000 people signing up for it. Apart from Kenya, the second highest number came from Nepal. So clearly there's an appetite for learning more about it, and that's one of the roles that we play there. And then, of course, we look to work with the political will and create sort of frameworks and policies for actions. There are a number of conventions that are dealing with aspects related to disasters and chemical emergencies, if you will. There are, of course, the Sendai framework, where finally we've got recognition of the role of the ecosystem in disaster risk reduction. So we help with creating that political will. And to do that, we work very closely with governments and our member states. I would mention that we have now in December coming up the United Nations Environment Assembly, which will focus on pollution. And there's a very, very strong link to what we'll be discussing here over the next days on that. So through that, I think we'll at least create awareness and help raise that political will to deal with it and to focus on prevention and resilience.
Let me bring in now Ms. Gabriela Wyman. How do you, as a representative of the humanitarian sector, see our ability to work together as change agents across sectors? Because what we're seeing is that there seems not to be that connection. And so what is the role of humanitarian community in supporting environmental goals as well as vice versa?
Thank you, Joyce. For those of you who don't know the Norwegian Refugee Council, we like to call ourselves a displacement-oriented agency, and that means addressing displacement needs before they happen, preventing them, all the way to responding and providing durable solutions. And if I can quote you just one statistic from this region during my intervention, that is the drought in Somalia, which is currently purely drought-related, created nearly 1 million displaced people in Somalia in the last about a year. In answering your question, I would like to use an example from some of the programs that we implement in Somalia. And the best example here is a program called Building Resilient Communities in Somalia. So it's a resilience-based program. Several NGOs work together on this program. And the reason why I think this is a good example is because the entire program is based on the premise that there is a hand-in-hand relationship between addressing environmental and humanitarian goals. And that is because very often the problems faced by each of the two sectors are perpetuated by factors within the other sector. The resilience program takes a holistic and a bottom-up approach to inform how we should respond to the disasters faced by each individual community. And that's also an important point to stretch. Each community is different, and therefore the problems that they face are all different. Communities don't live in silos and in sectors. And they quickly therefore guide us to solutions that cut across the traditional humanitarian, development, environmental, or peace and security divides that are constructs that we have created. In the resilience program, the most overarching shock that we normally deal with is drought. And that's of course perpetuated by an array of other shocks, predominantly conflict and other issues, environmental degradation certainly being one of them. The outcome of the factors, however, is usually massive displacement and usually to urban areas. So increasingly, resilience-based programs like the BRICS is one way in which the humanitarian sector can act as a change agent in environmental issues. By initially working through participatory community-based approaches, resilience programs first stabilize communities by providing life-saving assistance, water, shelter, food, and medium-term social protection needs. We also build trust, and in turn use this trust to receive the community buy-in to resolve some of the more longer-term, more complex problems that the communities are dealing with. And this is particularly true for historically different ecosystem and resource-based issues. Just to give some examples of the interventions, farmer field schools, which is originally an FAO concept, self-help groups, disaster management committees. With these type of committees, with these type of interventions, we develop a network of early adapters open to new ideas and long-term change. Farmer field schools along rivers, for example, allow forecast-based scale-up of fodder supplies. While field schools in arid lands have embraced land reclamation projects, combining erosion control, reforestation, and conservation agricultural approaches. So the resilience program has paired these forward-thinking activities with climate-centered early warning systems that prompt early cost-effective social protection support as a disaster is developing. The resilience response to the 2017 Horn of Africa drought, or the Somalia drought as we're dealing with it, began in 2016 by using its foundation on long-term activities, many of them environmentally rooted. Now, by the end of 2017, we've had the opportunity to look back and see how the extremely poor villages targeted by the resilience program have fared. And surprisingly, or maybe not so surprising to this audience, we found that the villages targeted by the resilience program are doing distinctly better than some of the villages that have not been supported, and as a matter of fact are even hosting some of the displaced of villages next door. So if I can just leave you with one thought here, and that is that we must respond early based on the probability of a disaster rather than waiting for confirmation that the disaster has happened. This is nothing new. This is nothing new. We have said this for 15, 20, maybe even 30 years, Mr. Abbas. However, our systems are still very much siloed and very much geared towards one or the other. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I'd now like to bring in Dr. Abbas. You work at a national level and deal with these emergencies time and time again. What's your take on the current policy processes? How do you see the role of the locals and national actors in evolving in the future? Because what we're seeing right now is that unlike maybe there are champion countries that are getting out of their way and trying to do things to make sure that they take care of the future, there are certain countries, including countries like Kenya and maybe Somalia, that are lagging behind. But what would you like to see done, and how do you think it should be done?
Thank you, Joy. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So I would try to share with you three experiences or three small scenario stories that will hopefully try to spur a debate on this subject. And the three stories or scenarios that I want to share with you is that we have experienced in the last few years here in Kenya and in Nairobi, and I attempt to present key points for discussion to this panel. Two of the experiences are local and one is global. Firstly, for those of you who live in Kenya would remember in 2011, we had an oil spill from an industrial fuel storage facility in Nairobi that resulted in the fire that killed over 100 people. The basic fact of the story is that the adjacent to the fuel storage facility was a densely populated informal settlement population, making the spread of the fire and eventually the death toll be much higher than it would normally be. This was what is now referred to as the Sinai fire. As we speak today, there is an ongoing litigation by a section of the victims seeking compensation, identifying acts of negligence on the part of the public authorities and the company that was owning the storage facility. Secondly is a story that relates to the experience of floods in Nairobi in 2015. Those who live in Nairobi then would recall that the impact of the long rains was flooding over large parts of Nairobi, resulting in the losses and the damage of worth millions of shillings, including losses of lives. The common perception among many Kenyans was that the rainfall were higher than the normal rainfall. However, experts identified that considering the long-term patterns, the rains we experienced in Nairobi then were basically normal. They were not higher. Even the impact was not also. Following the same pattern, the areas that traditionally did not have major flooding with floods are now flooded regularly, like Kajiado, Marsabit, and many other counties of this country continue to experience flooding with the normal rain, and it's just not even higher than the normal for that matter. The third story relates to a global weather pattern. A more recent study shows that the world is now experiencing up to 400 extreme weather events in any given year, an increase of up to 4 times. These include flooding, drought, heat waves, etc., etc. And of course, the general suspect is climate change. Whereas the experience is global, and of course, the impact is not. Developing countries and poor populations suffer more as a result of these extreme weather events. When this is combined with experience in countries such as Kenya, where the same population are hit by different extreme weather events, that cycles of flood and drought destroys the coping capacities or mechanism of these communities to survive other disasters in the future, including those not related to even weather. What is the link then between these three stories? Firstly, the environment, as we know, it is an enabling asset in reducing vulnerability of our communities. Humanitarian agencies are now focusing on building resilience of communities and more and more. The value of environment or the community and well-being cannot be overemphasized. At its basic, a changing ecological pattern can have severe impacts on the communities. The environment impacts in the aftermath of disasters and conflict, whether directly through damage of land, water, or air, or indirectly through coping strategies that stresses the natural resources, can leave population with degraded natural resources base and greater vulnerability to future events. Take, for example, pastoralist communities, whose livelihood patterns are linked to the ecological zones. For such a livelihood where the ecological borders are determining their livelihood decisions, including movement and any severe changes in the ecological and biodiversity, will have a range of consequences with dire humanitarian impacts. For example, increasingly, the link between conflicts in pastoralist communities and conflict can directly be linked to resource scarcity, which in turn is linked to the changing ecological as a result of desertification, unsustainable practices such as overstocking, and in some areas, unplanned urbanization. Secondly, more often we have come to accept that rapid urbanization is not reversible in developing countries like in Kenya. The impact of this urbanization and the built environment on increasing vulnerability of communities does not receive the attention it deserves from the national institutions. As the case of the Sinai fire, the Nairobi flooding shows unplanned rapid infrastructure development can create new patterns of vulnerabilities and disasters. Those who are affected most are the poor in informal settlement who are unable to transfer the risks due to lack of resources. It goes without saying that many countries, those who access to power have not only the potential, but in some cases, inclination not to remain faithful to regulations and policies that seek to prevent environmental risks. In those cases, their decisions result in risks to those who remain faithful to the law or to the poor who lack the mechanism of avoiding those risks. Viewed that way, in my view, from the policy perspective, the biggest challenge we face in a policy architecture is a policy architecture that does not protect all in equal measures. Thirdly, the unsustainable techniques used during humanitarian phase, combined with short-term planning and ad hoc responses mechanism, can leave disasters and conflict-prone regions on trajectories that continue to overexploit natural resources, leading to a degradation of the very ecosystem needed for recovery and building livelihoods for the affected population. This way, we are in many instances part of the problem. Ladies and gentlemen, from these points, I see a number of critical roles for national institutions and actors in the future. First is linking the science and practice of reducing vulnerabilities. Institutions that work on reducing vulnerabilities need to spend sufficient resources in exploring how non-scientific knowledge on climate, biodiversity, and ecological can make meaningful impact on strengthening the agenda of reducing vulnerability. In my view, as they say, if Muhammad can't come to the mountain must go to Muhammad. I see a greater role for us to approach and create synergies with the scientific community. Secondly, I see greater role for breaking down the barriers created by power and power imbalance in both the policy making and policy implementation. Prevention of environmental disasters requires a push for good citizenship. Who can play a better role than neutral, independent organization? We should not shy away to advocate for better planning in the development and the growth trajectories of our cities. I see a greater role for us in engaging the private sector in advocating for investment that are risks screened. I hope we can debate these points further, but we'll stop here for the time being. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Doctor. And I'd now like to bring in Mr. Jesper Lund. From your observation and what the other speakers just mentioned, is it the role of humanitarians or development actors to bridge the divide between humanitarian response as well as human development from where you sit? Because Dr. Abbas just said that what we need to do more of is policy making for disaster prevention. Do you agree with that?
A short and easy statement is yes, of course it is. It's fascinating to be on a high-level panel on very small chairs, so you have to bear with us up here. Yes, it is important, but we also have to recognize it does not happen by itself. We keep seeing the humanitarian community making the same mistakes. We are building camps for refugees or IDPs, and they have to go out and collect their own firewood, and we see around the camp deforestations. we see after effective fishing communities, we are distributing new and more efficient tools, and a few years later we will see overfishing and people have to move away to sustain their livelihood. We see in the aftermath of now the hurricane sweeping through the Caribbean that we will have a rubble clearing program, and everybody thinks this is a win-win. We clear the rubble and we create job opportunities for people, but nobody is really asking, what are we doing with the rubble? Are we actually creating a problem down the road with pollutions and areas where people can no longer stay? The way the humanitarian system is organized is in clusters where we have a number of lead agencies, and interestingly enough, while we have quite a number of clusters, there is no cluster or no focus on environment. Environment is mainstreamed. It's a responsibility of each individual organization and each individual cluster leads. So when we as the Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs is trying to coordinate and looking at the different programs from the clusters, and we don't see environmental issues featuring very high, and we come back to our colleagues and saying, what is the environmental impact of your program? Have you considered this? And they're saying, shh, we are working, we are doing life saving. We have no time for this long-term sustainable considerations. If I was an affected community, the last thing I wanted to hear is, we are meeting, we are planning strategically and long-term. If we want to be serious about this, this has to happen here and now. We have to have a long-term strategic discussions on how we ensure the environmental impact is considered in the way we do humanitarian programming, the way we do disaster risk reduction, mitigation, and prevention. And it has to happen in dialogue with potentially already affected communities. But the key challenge is not necessarily to agree on a strategic agenda. The important part is to translate this into concrete action, not just remain with the UN jargon that we are very good at, all these long buzzwords as a non-native speaker that I'm finding difficult really to pronounce. But we need to translate it into concrete actions that improve the daily life of the communities that we want to assist, because only then they would understand and appreciate what we are trying to do, and only then the many, many organizations that are working in this field would understand how small adjustments can make a long-term impact and ensure the consideration for the environment and ensure long-term resilience. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And of course, we're seeing a number of tweets as well coming through the hashtag 2017EEF. I'll probably just read about two. Anna, you're saying environment is a victim and also a solution to disasters and conflicts as well. Almost reiterating what Mette Wilke was saying. And we also have Robert Kaufman, who is saying global weather patterns show 4 times more rain than historic average. Changes in environment threatens resilience, also reiterating what Dr. Abbas said. But we've got a question here, and this one is coming in from Francis, who is asking, what do you do at a time when the government, the same government that is meant to implement these policies, is still going against the rules and making it even worse to reverse the effects of climate change? I think this is a question that is going to go to all of us, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm going to start with Dr. Abbas. You deal with national issues, and you know that there are times when the government that implements actually goes against what they've set out to implement.
No, thank you, Joyce. So from the perspective, my own personal perspective and that of my organization, the Red Cross is auxiliary to the government of every country, in every country, and enacted by an act of parliament. So probably we have some sort of leverage, I would say, in engaging government, but probably we also engage them not in a confrontational manner and not in an open forum, but probably engage them more in a dialogue and in a quiet diplomacy in that way. And I can use a number of examples, I mean, where we could lead from the front and do things. For example, in Dadaab, in the refugee camps, 25 years of Kenya hosting Somali refugees, even if one would claim that part of Kenya was arid and semi-arid, there were trees and there were shrubs, good amount of trees. But 25 years, the place has been totally turned around to basically almost become a desert. If I recall, in 2011, at the height of the new influx, or as a result of the famine then in Somalia and the conflict, where hundreds of thousands crossed over and came into E42, my first visit to E42 in October 2011, there were big trees around. But if you go to E42 today, you'd be lucky if you see one big tree. If I was the Kenya government, I would have engaged the UN 25 years ago in accepting to host the refugees. We should then work seriously on the environment and recovering, regenerating that environment. It hasn't happened. Refugees are now going back, and what will happen is the host community will be left, to hang out dry. So the last couple of years, we decided that with UNHCR, as Kenya Red Cross, we'll take the responsibility and start regenerating that environment. And today we can see actually some difference in a small way, but it is possible that it can be done. And you don't have to wait for government, but we've engaged both county government and the central government to say they've also been partly sleeping on their job in that sense. But depending on other areas that I can use within my work, where it's absolutely necessary for us, where we can engage the various government ministries in bringing to their attention if some of these policies are not being implemented. And probably it's a privileged position that the Red Cross or Red Crescent enjoy worldwide, but we're also probably sometimes not very good in using it as an organization. But I think government would respect if there's an honest criticism, honest discussion, and honest bringing things to the table to them, because they should know that you're not in competition with them. It's their business, but if they don't do it, then you remind them and the need for them to take their responsibility, but in a shared partnership way that we have been able to do it.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I guess we'll let Dr. Abbas finish off with that. And we'll move on to another question that's coming in from Angela, who is asking, some countries, especially mineral-rich countries, tend to pay less attention to the effects of environmental degradation. What can be done, especially by the authorities in those countries? Wilkie, you can take this on.
Sure, and I think it touches a little bit on the previous question as well, and something that Gabriela was saying, that the government also works in silos. We, certainly from our side, are preaching to the converted. We're talking to the ministries of environment. They know what the issues are, they know how important they are, but they don't necessarily have the power that's needed to persuade the whole government to change policy. To do so, you need to talk to the Ministry of Planning, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Industry, and here we're talking about the Ministry of Mines. But there are some powerful tools we have. We have, for instance, recently been invited into Colombia to look and see how we can help that country build back better after they've had a ceasefire. And one of the things we did was we took some of the ministers and politicians up in a small plane and flew over some of the areas where perhaps they've been inaccessible in the past. And they could see the devastating effects of mining on the natural resources, on the forest, on the pollution of the waters, of the rivers, and so on. Having such a powerful image by seeing it on a larger scale from up high is tremendously important and will make sure that something is happening on the ground. It's so powerful. So I think making better use of images, making better use of the social media and the general public that are more aware of what's happening, that I think is what is needed for us to make sure that the government stands up and takes notice and takes action.
Thank you. We'll now take some questions from the audience. We'll keep the questions short and to the point. We'll take about maybe 4 or 5 questions. Yes, we'll start at the back over there. Who comes second? Let's see, yes. And then the lady in white, or off-white, and then the gentleman on the far end on the side. So let's have 3 questions first, and then we'll take the second set. Thank you.
Yes, hello, hi, good morning. My name is Mark Kaira from the World Food Programme. So my question is on shocks of climate-based emergencies. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the capacities that governments have that you've seen, maybe here in the region, on how they're able to absorb new caseloads. So for example, if you're talking about a chronic situation where, let's say you have 1 million people that required chronic assistance because of some kind of climate issue, but then there's this new El Nino, there's this new other, tsunami, hurricane, whatnot. How do we then include this new 500,000 people into a government system? So if you can just reflect a little bit on that. Thanks.
The second question from the lady in the middle row.
Okay, mine is not really a question. Mine is just to reiterate what Dr. Abbas is saying. So one, the issue of floods here in Nairobi, indeed there was a lot of outcry. But I think when you look at the root causes of those floods, you will find that a lot of the areas where these floods could actually infiltrate to, the wetlands have actually been destroyed. So just to reiterate that point. The second thing is just to also bring up the point that we've been working with Kenya Red Cross as Wetlands International in a partnership called the Partners for Resilience. And indeed, we've seen a lot of impact in using the approach we call the integrated risk management approach, being able to work both as humanitarian partners and development partners. But of course, one of the things I'd like to put forward is that when you look at some of those issues, you find that here in Kenya, disaster risk reduction is the issue that's really caught up in most communities. So issues such as environmental management and restoration, you need to work a lot more to bring those up to the communities. So some of the ways we've worked on this is being able to use tools, some of the tools that Red Cross is using, being able to actually put issues to do with environmental management within those tools to be able to make them a success. So really, it's not really a question, but just to reiterate what Dr. Abbas is saying. Thank you.
We didn't get your names.
I'm Julie Mulonga, Wetlands International.
Thank you. We'll take the third question.
Yeah, okay. Good morning to you all. Mine is also a question, but like a contribution. I'm Deneng from the Gambia. My contribution goes on the issue of government developing policies at the same time not implementing it. Instead, being the lead in destroying the environment. There are, governments come out. For example, my own country, we had, one of the best policies in terms of environmental policies and forestry. The next minute, just a few weeks ago, we had a serious problem. A park that has been protected for 62 years was slighted in the name of development, just to set up hotels and conference centers. So it is a very great concern with government developing policies and being the lead in destroying these policies. Thank you.
Okay, we'll get feedback from our panelists, and then we'll take the second set of questions. There was one that, the first question was about what capacities do governments have? And Gabriela, you want to respond to that?
Thank you. No, you raise a really important and pertinent point. I think Jesper mentioned this morning that we're now looking at 60 million people that are displaced globally. We keep on adding people to the list. We don't do enough to take people off the list. So last year it was 55 million people that were displaced. This year we're looking at 60 million people displaced, and I can guarantee you that when the report comes out next year, it will be 70 million people displaced. So what can we do more to take people off our books? The issues here, and this is, I think, coming to the core and the heart of what this conference is about, is that for us to be able to take people off the lists, we need the involvement of all actors, and that is not just the humanitarian actors, that is also also the developmental actors, the environmental actors, and the peace and reconciliation actors. All 4 pillars of the United Nations need to be involved in this. What we often see is, there's many conferences that have been held over the last few months about the new way of working, right? Bringing development and humanitarian closer together. But what we're often seeing is that in the more hard-to-reach areas, the more, conflict-affected areas, you see the developmental actors retracting, and to stay and deliver becomes the problem of humanitarian actors. As a result of the new way of working, there has been a real call, and I think that call has been heard by some of the developmental actors, to stay and deliver with us. We all have our level of expertise, but just to give you a fantastic example from Yemen, where the World Bank has not left, despite what's going on in Yemen. And currently we're faced with a civil service that is not being paid, for example, in Yemen. So for us humanitarian actors to be able to respond to the current cholera outbreak in Yemen, we are anticipating that there is a certain base upon which we can work. There's a certain level of healthcare in place upon which the additional response can be mounted. But if that base is falling away, if that base is breaking apart, because those civil servants don't get their salaries and have moved out, then the humanitarian sector cannot fill that void. And that is why we're not reaching the people in need. The World Bank is now stepping in, providing the base to keep that base running, providing the salaries. That's a good example of how you can bring the sectors closer together. The same is true for the environmental actors. I know there was a fantastic UNEP report on the environmental impacts around Dadaab and Kakuma, the 2 refugee camps here in Kenya. I think that report is from 2007, if I'm not mistaken. But the operationalization of the fantastic findings of that report, the action that was subsequently required, did not translate. So that gives you a little bit of an understanding, not just of the government capacity, but also our own capacity to actually make sure that all parts of the house work together. Thank you.
All right. Dr. Abbas, you wanted to add something?
Yeah,
Briefly.
I wanted to add to what Gabriela said. And having been in this, call it humanitarian industry for many, many years, close to 45 years, from a youth volunteer in the Red Cross to where I am now, I just want to say, even we as humanitarian actors, INGOs, NGOs, UN, many times we bash the government and we blame government, and to a lot of extent correctly so, but in many instances we need to look ourselves in the mirror too, in what we do and how we do it. And I use the example of the numbers that Gabriela just talked about. Do we really want to reverse these numbers? Because if we really want to reverse, we can. And it's not rocket science, it's common sense. In relation to Kenya, droughts and climate-related challenges will now happen almost every 5 years, guaranteed, because the scientific information is there. For the last 100 years, this pattern had been there, it's getting more and more challenging. The Kenya government should address this issue, but I also believe on their own accord they will not be able to address themselves. So partners, whether development partners or whether UN or World Bank and all others, and humanitarian actors, we can. We have a drought now that was as bad as the 2011 one, but what have we learned over the last 5 years to now address these issues that the gentleman from WFP was asking? And for me, it's a question to simply say, we're going to pilot one county out of the 47 in Kenya in the coming 2-3 weeks. Because already the scientific information is there, like I said earlier. How do we link our best practices in relation to this scientific information that is available? The Weatherman, Climate Center, ICPAC and IGAD is telling us you will have good rains. So if we're going to have good rains, what do we do with these communities that are agro-pastoralists, who basically are farmers also keeping animals? What they require is seeds. If we know for sure in Ukambani, the 3 counties of Kitui, Makueni, Machakos in Kenya are going to have good rains. This is the main planting season. What they need now is certified seeds now. A basic commodity called green grams costs 250 Kenya shillings per kilogram, $2.5. 2 kilograms will cost $5. I just need to give a family $5 worth of seed for them to plant Joy, And in 3 months, the rains will come mid-October, but around mid-January, February, they'll be harvesting. And from 1 acre, they could easily harvest 5 to 6 bags of 90 kilograms of this green gram. It will cost to sell, they can sell it minimum throwaway price at 4,000 shillings. When they had invested only 500 bob, they can they can reap 4,000 per bag if they did 5 or 6 bags. So really, if we want to end poverty, eradicate hunger, give people back their dignity, all these things can be done with little resources. We spend more money on emergencies than addressing the root cause of some of these challenges. And this is where I believe the talk should move away from the quantum of relief and development. I mean, we've beaten this dead horse for the last 50 years, and we just need to change and move on.
All right. Jesper, I'd like to hear your views in regard to the question that was raised by the gentleman from the Gambia who actually talked about a national park that has had to be done away with at the expense of development or infrastructure development. How does a country like the Gambia, also start to seriously take the environment and just about how much of an impact it has when it comes to climate change and the effects of climate change?
Thank you. I'm not sure I'm the best speaker to reply to that answer, but what we see, of course, too often is short-term gains push aside long-term sustainable solution. There are definitely reasons for forests or areas being protected, and it's going back to Abbas's point. We need to ensure that there is a long-term strategy, and we need to work with governments to build trust and make them understand why this is important. And I was very fascinated by these bottles because 10 years ago it was a big evolution that we started having plastic bottles. And now we all realize that step forward was maybe in reality an environmental step backwards, and the cost will be significantly higher. So we need to reconsider and look at the long-term consequence and impact, and then adjust the way we are working, the way we are living, and the way we are managing disasters to really benefit from it. But then also to go back to the question from our colleagues from World Food Programme, with all these crises and emergencies throughout the world and the shortage of funds, it is literally impossible to raise funds for prevention and preparedness, even though we all know it's the most effective way and the cheapest way to address these challenges. Thank you.
Well, in the interest of time, we're not taking the second set of questions, but in case you want to raise any questions at all, you can personally reach out to our panelists, but I think there's a burning question. We'll take one more and then quickly move on to the next part of the session today. Yes, we'll have one final question.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Banak Joshua. Once again, thank you for the opportunity. I'm Banak Joshua. I work for the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management in South Sudan. First, I would like also to take this time to thank Mr. Wilkie for inviting South Sudan to engage in this important forum. Most of the comments are very interesting to us because, as you all know, South Sudan is still developing policies. We are finished with the policy on the environment. We are now struggling also to get through with the policy on DRR. My question will be, there was a very disturbing comment from Dr. Abbas, because this is exactly addresses the current situation in the country where we are in war, and we have 4 million displaced. 2 million displaced internally and 2 million refugees. So I wonder, what could this House and the panelists tell us, say that South Sudan take important steps to avoid a major catastrophe in terms of the climate change? That's my first question. The second question is why we're developing the DRR policy, and of course in line with the regional and international treaties regarding DRRs, especially mentioned to the Sendai framework and the climate change agreement in Paris. What would you tell us? What good steps and experiences you can share with us so that we develop a law or a policy that would address the current emerging issues? Thank you.
All right, there's a lady, yes, we'll take that final question. So you can actually pose your question, go ahead.
Thank you so much. My name is Dr. Parita Shah from University of Nairobi, Department of Geography and Environmental Studies. I would like to add to the continuing discussion. What I have realized that our concepts need to be evolving, they need to be changing. For example, like sustainable development, a lot of attention has been given to the focus on the needs of the present generation and to cater for the needs of the future generation also. I think if we add in concepts which are evolving, like the peace and humanitarian aspect, the understanding between the people on the ground and the scientists as well as academia would really, really improve. The same would be for the multilateral environmental agreements. Whenever we have the COPs and the amendments, we should always have the highlight on the current situation. Like in this case, it is the humanitarian aspect and peace. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I think we'll take the responses to those questions as closing remarks, and so you can tie that as well with what you think should be the top priority outcome from this forum, in addition to the questions that have been raised by the various participants. So we'll start with Mette Wolke.
Thank you very much. I won't give a detailed answer to the question raised from the gentleman sitting in the front row. I will expect that the discussions that we will have over the next 2.5 days will give you lots of food for thought on that. Just to say that for me, there are sort of 3 outcomes that I'd really like to see from this conference. The first, of course, is that we share information on innovative solutions. I think there has to be a focus on solutions moving forward, be it in terms of prevention, being in terms of dealing with the actual emergencies, or being in terms of building back better. But the innovative solution should be a red thread throughout the conference here. The second one is the building of new coalitions. It's expanding the networks, talking to partners that perhaps we haven't spoken to before, but building a coalition of the willing to help move this forward in between the meetings that we have, useful as they may be. And the purpose of that, and that's my third one, is to help us all be better at creating the political will for action. I think the more we can give each other's good arguments, we can give each other's the facts, we can give each other's those solutions that are available there, and share experiences on how we use all of that to influence those who take the decision and make sure that we do create the political will to, as Jesper was saying, also funnel funding to prevention and resilience rather than just look at we need to provide funding once an emergency has happened. Thank you.
All right, Jesper, we'll take your final remarks and what your expectations are from the forum.
Okay, one of my key points working in the humanitarian field is that we cannot implement change through command and control. We can only implement change by working with people to create trust, to create understanding, and mutual courses on addressing some of the challenges that we all are facing. If we want to address the root causes, we need to understand them. If we want to assist people in their situation, we need to understand that situation and how we best can assist them, and to ensure in that process is a long-term sustainable process that we are going into. So, and we have not all the answers. So I'm looking forward in the coming days to have all of you participate, share your knowledge, your experience, whether you are from the communities affected like the lady from the wetland societies, or you are from scientific institutions, to come together and assist us in addressing some of these challenges. And to be very blunt to the colleague from the South Sudan, if you had asked me that question directly, I would say, what can you do and what will you do? Because that's the starting point. We can only help you if you know what you can do and what you will do. That's where the discussion have to start, and that's where all the discussions have to start. Because the minute that we say it's your problem and not my problem, then we have lost it. Thank you.
Ms. Gabriela.
Thank you very much. I must say I was also very moved by the question you posed. We have a huge program in South Sudan as Norwegian Refugee Council. We assist many of your people with life-saving humanitarian assistance, and we would love to do more than just life-saving. We would love to help, the country get back on its feet. But I think, the answer to your question is we need peace, and we need peace desperately, and we need it yesterday and not tomorrow. People are really, as you know very well, very, very badly affected in South Sudan, and we see that on a daily basis. So peace is paramount, because without peace, you can't move even towards development. What we're currently struck with in South Sudan is that we are on this, cycle after cycle after cycle of short-term interventions, because we can't even keep our feet on the ground. Most of our interventions are currently mobile emergency response, because the fighting is moving from one place to another, and it's very difficult for us to even keep our feet on the ground. So peace is paramount. Developmental, a combination of the humanitarian and developmental interventions. We need investments in your youth. Your youth needs jobs, your youth needs opportunities, so that they actually are invested in the country and want the country to remain peaceful. So there's a lot of things that can be done and a lot of things that need to be done, and I think this entire room would look forward to helping you in that. But I think Jasper is right that, of course, the leadership needs to come from the authorities in South Sudan. And maybe that just sums up what the top priority of this conference should be. The top priority of this conference should be how we can, as a community, work together. The silos are not helpful. They are social constructs that we have developed. I had some chats with some old colleagues before joining this podium, and I said it's such a blessing actually to be working on the other side, on one of the implementing agencies side, because we work with communities. So communities honestly don't care whether a program is implemented by the environmental arm of the UN or by this NGO or by that NGO, as long as they're getting the services that they need. So I think on that note, I think if we, as a starting point, you look at what communities want and what communities need and what they tell us the solutions are, then I think we would be on the right track. Thank you.
Dr. Abbas.
So like Gabriela and Jasper says, for the delegate and the brother from South Sudan, the ball is squarely on your court as a country and as a government. No one from outside can come and sort the mess that South Sudanese have created for themselves. It is appalling, it is sad. I was there in January 2014, just after this crisis started, to go and work with the South Sudan Red Cross and to even have access to people, when people could not even move out of Juba. So I wonder what sort of leadership why do people click to leadership? Why do they stay in leadership? For what? And to what end? How many more lives have to be lost before people can come to terms with the reality? So, I mean, we're not here to talk politics, but the fact of the matter is, no meaningful development can take place in South Sudan for as long as there is insecurity and the conflict going on today, period. And maybe, sorry to say this to you, my brother, because probably you are much lower up in the hierarchy of the country, and those in powerful positions don't want to let it go, whether it's the military or those in the politics. But we can only hope and pray that sooner than later a solution, and a long-lasting, meaningful solution, can be found for that beautiful land, because the people of that country do not deserve what they are getting. But going back to the discussion here and the 3 days that people are going to be here, for me, my message is just very simple at the end of the day. When do we all stop talking and start acting and moving? Because it's not for lack of resources, whether it's money, whether it's human brain, whether it is other resources. These communities we talk about, they know so much, and we take it for granted that they don't know. We're going to work for them, we're going to do things for them, we're going to this and that. They have lots of knowledge and expertise that they just need somebody to be a catalyst. So my biggest advice is, let's talk, less talking and more action would be the solution if this meeting is to be remembered for anything. Otherwise, we shouldn't allow it to be another talk shop that we talk in all these big conferences. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists. I think usually when we talk about the environment, we forget that our political leaders also play a huge role in ensuring that they can, on their part as well, contribute to environmental stability, if I might call it that. And as we talk about, moving from crisis to opportunity and building resilience by managing environmental risks and emergencies, I guess the story of South Sudan cannot be neglected. Neither can the stories of other countries like Syria and Iran, where we have seen most of the damage being done on the environment as a result of war. So we've come to a close for this particular session, but we've got one more before we can head out for lunch, and this should be an interesting one. A gentleman from the Republic of Somalia, he's called Halif Hassan Dalma, Environmental Officer for the Office for Environmental Affairs in the Federal Government of Somalia. Why did I say Republic? The Federal Government of Somalia. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Halif Hassan Dalma. He's coming to talk about my vision for the future. As you envision the future, what do you envision for the environment as well? Quite a conversation we're going to have. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Khalif Hassan Dalmar. I think today I'm going to answer the question of which Master Dr. Abbas raised, which is when are we going to stop talking and taking and acting? So I'm very lucky today, and I want to share with you Sorry. I'm going to talk about Somalia environment and what the challenges of the country and what are the steps we can take. And personally, I am Khalif Hassan Dalmar. As I told you, I'm environmental activist. I was one of the regional finalists of the Young Champion of the Earth Prize. Done by UN Environment with this year. We are going to take two issues, which is, first one is what are the concerns and the key challenges of Somali environment, and secondly, what is the solutions and way forward. So, for those who don't know Somalia, Somalia is located in Horn of Africa. We are neighboring Kenya and Ethiopia and Djibouti and on the coastal Indian Ocean. Somalia is semi-arid with a very deserty, very limited foresty. The country have been for almost three decades for prolonged conflict and civil war, lack of effective government. Video. So we are going to show you a video which highlights the droughts which has been frequently recurring in Somalia since the last 10 years. And I really appreciate the high panelists they were talking about, like Gabriela and Dr. Abbas. They were talking about how droughts are affected in Somalia. So we're going to show you that video. It's very short. That is very clear, this talk, as I highlighted. So what are the key challenges? These questions are always comes to our minds. So in key challenges for environment in Somalia, one of the lack of community and environmental awareness. Most people, they don't have clearly concept about what environment is. Personally, I did environmental science outside of the Somalia. Then when I went back to Somalia, people were asking me, which course you did? I told them that I did environmental science. Then they were surprising. What are you talking about? So even when I was trying to confuse what environment is, I was telling them it talks about forestry, it relates to the agriculture, something like that. So it is very, very challenging. People, they don't have a clear concept what environment is. Another point is lack of proper waste and chemical management. Mostly, because of the lack of government, there's no waste separation, there's no mechanism for waste collection. This is very also a problem. Poverty and insecurity. Poverty is one of the key challenges in Somalia, and desperate people, they always feel driving by their places for just clearing the forest, cultivating, rearing, practicing more animal. Then at the end of that, the land will be degraded. Other point is that lack of political commitment. Really, right now, we don't have a Minister of Environment. And this is very, very important to have a political commitment. And I really appreciate the Master Eric Sarah, the Executive Director of UN Environment. He was visited in Somalia this year, May. I really appreciate it, and I think he will continue to come. And he met the Prime Minister. Unfortunately, that day I wasn't there, but I just felt that Somali environment is coming back. Another issue is that impact of climate change. These very, very critical issues. The country is semi-desert, and the drought has been recurring almost 3 consecutive years. People were lost in the animals. So, and it's very, very important to take urgent action. Other issue is that unreported and unregulated illegal fishing practice. Somalia has a very long coastline. Since 1991, the foreign vessels for fishing were exploiting the fishing and exclusive zone for. Then this resulted threatening the coastal community livelihoods and also advanced coastal environmental degradation and ecosystem. This also resulted the pirates. I think most of you, when you hear about Somalia, you just came to your mind maybe a pirate killing something very bad things. But just I want to confirm a lot of good things also going on in the country. There are many people, young people, who are doing the work in the environment, the humanitarian, work in the humanitarian issues. So we also remind you that we have also very positive things are going on. Urban development and waste management. This is common. I just talk about because of there's no even the waste management policy. So this is a common. Everywhere you go, there is plastic bags. There is remaining weapons. So this is there's no separation, as I earlier highlighted. Mogadishu development and trees. Now the country is the process of development and peace. So there is development within the towns. So people were cutting the tree just for constructions. There are maybe those trees, they are like 40 years old tree. So they just cut. So because of they don't understanding the importance of the tree, they are not even feeling the plants are very important for their lives. So this is also issues currently. So key concerns or what are the impacts of this problems were droughts. Most Somali people are livestock, animal, they depend on the livestock. Therefore, they lost animals. When they lost animals, the end of poverty, then they go to the forest, they clear, then the environmental degradation continue. Floods, we have two floods. We have Chuba River and Shabelle. Mostly when there's too much raining, the river, Chuba River floods. Then these things also caused problems to the urban stream, lower stream people. Other thing is the humanitarian crisis. That picture you are seeing, it is when the cholera broken out in this year and 2016. There were many people coming from the rural area because they lost their animals. Then they come to the big towns. Land degradation. Now the country is where irreversible threatening the land degradation are getting worse day by day. So there's no even the land cannot support the animal for feeding, and also for long-term plan, it also affected the sustainability of the land. You can see that tree. Maybe the next year you will not see because of the galley swallowing the tree. So, and that other picture is there is NGOs. They constructed the soil and water conservation. Then this is not sustainable way. They don't make in a sustainable way. So this is humanitarian, and that's what I already highlighted, but it increases IBDS, then loss of lives and property, lack of health and sanitation in Islamic areas, food insecurity. This is the impact of crisis, humanitarian crisis, and environment. Environment and security. In Somalia, most young people, they don't have alternatives. They just practice any what comes to their mind. They can join the radical groups. They can go forest and clear. Then because of, they just use any means which is unsustainable to environment. And political instability is also a very, very critical issues in Somalia. And just those people, they practice to meet their livelihoods. They do any whatever comes to their mind, killing the livestock, killing the wildlife animals. So, environment and poverty, sustainable livelihood, unsustainable livelihood options. Somalia people, they practice charcoal. In 2012, UN Council Security, they were just banning the charcoal. But still, people, they don't have other options. When people, they don't have other option, they just go forest and clear. So you cannot say you stop unless you create people something to do. And even telling them that this is very important for your life and for your future children. Mostly, poor people are affected mostly by environmental degradations. At the end of the day, when they clear the forest, there is nowhere to go. They just come to the town, then they may or join the other, whatever they want. So those are the challenges and the problems. So what are the way forward? Just I want to remind you, the young people are important for us for sustainable for achieving sustainable development. So I just felt that this is very important. Young people, they can take a very, very good step for sustainability. So I just what are the solutions? So personally, I just developed Somali Institute for Environmental Peace. I selected even peace to show people that environment is also need peace. So, and this will be a center for research, environmental awareness, creation, and education. And this comes to after there's no single institution for environmental courses. There's choice, but you can't find in Somalia environmental, particularly environmental institutions, even the higher tertiary, the university. It is very, very limited. You cannot see people are studying environment. This is very, very critical. So for clearing the trees in like Mogadishu, we just put these things, sorry, just see this, I want to highlight what the SIP means. What are the key components we are going to conduct? So most importantly, we want to educate the young people. Then that's when they feel what environment means. Then conducting environmental assessment and risk assessment. This is very important. The country has been a civil war, so we want to get information. How the environment, how far the environment has degraded, where need to do something. So this is very important. When we get information, that's when you take the way forward. Other thing is the raising community environmental awareness. First, we want to teach people what environment means, since there is very, very limited environmental awareness. And the other one is research on conflict impacts environment. We are going also to conduct our research in terms of even in how the civil war affected the environment. Through environmental awareness, we have been practicing in environmental exhibitions, visiting the videos, using the TV, the radios. We have been just trying to show off that this is about the environment is also very important. This is that is seminars I've been doing since the last year. We have been telling people in terms of plastic bags, stop plastic bags, and do something recyclable. We have been just trying to do more seminars regarding to environment and humanitarian crisis. Go. So there are many young people and business who are doing something very important when it comes to environment. They just work voluntarily for such as recyclable things. And they also go for the roads, they clean the roads, they replant trees along the roads. So we have been just encouraging those people, the work they have been doing to the environment. And we have been giving certificates and awards to do more work. So what are the short plans we are going to do? And to take to accomplish the mission and vision of the institution, what are the short plans we are going to conduct it and do it? We are going to conduct environmental studies and assessment, conduct and organize training and seminars on climate change, because climate change, Somalia is one of the countries which is very, very vulnerable for climate change. So we have been testing people, training how they will adapt to the climate change, what are the mitigations and good practice to adapt to climate change. We have been developing to offer diploma and certificate courses because it's very, very important to teach people the environment. So we have been started certificates and diploma. We're also trying to make those people, young people who are doing environment, to come to the center and do internship and practice more. So, because very few people are studying the environment in Somalia, I'm telling you, this is very really practice. There are very, very people who are studying the environment. So those people, they want to get encouragement. They want to get where they can expose and learn more. So this will be a center for those people. So this is very, very important. I just want to talk about today, and I also want to get this opportunity to share with you what are the needs we need to support, which area we need more information and support. Student scholarship. It is very critical people to Somalia students to come and study the environment. It's because they don't believe even the opportunity for jobs are not there. For people who study environment, so they are not really interested to study the environment. So we are just need to support scholarship, whether fully or partial. We also need support for curriculum development and teaching materials, for updating content for environmental studies. We also need support for office and classroom equipment and furnitures. This is very important. When you are starting something, it is very, very hard. And you have to also think the sustainability of these initiatives. So we also need support for this kind of assistance. We also need scientific research tools for data collection and analysis. To get real concrete, we have to get tools for analyzing the research after you collected the data. So this is also very important where we need to be supported. Development capacity of the researchers and trainers. We also need the people who are training the students and the researchers who are going to the field to be also training and get skills and knowledge to analyze the information we need at the end of those research. We need experts who can support us for researching, whether practically or scientifically. School information management. This is very important. We also need support for such as social media, website, and how the information will be keeping. We also need what kind of model information management is also very important. We also need those people who are dealing with the information to support us. What are the key challenges for this initiative? The challenges are many. This is not only limited to this, but there are many. We are limited fund, limited human resources, limited technical equipment. So Today, I'm very happy to take this opportunity and share with you this initiatives, and I hope at the end of this forum, we will be able to have something very concrete and relevant and supportive. So we are seeking your partnership for today. We are seeking for your pledge. We are seeking for your fundraising. We are seeking for your any kind of advice and consultations for implementing this very, very important idea. With that, in order to accomplish this activity and achieve sustainable development, we need much greater efforts, such as restore the degraded land, pushing back the desert, and replanting the tree, and also thinking about green energy and innovations for sustainable energy. It is also very important to think about what are the alternatives of plastic bags. Everywhere you go in Somalia, you went to Somalia or the country, there are plastic bags. Somalia, we are lucky we don't have industrial for plastic bags. So this is also very important at this stage to take, before these industrials are coming, the country, we have to do some policy and some to avoid these chemicals coming in the country. So with that, I thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Halef. Did you wind up on a comma? You wound up with a comma. All right, thank you so much. That's a really moving presentation. And, you know, when he talks about the key concerns, I'm sure you can feel the difference between your country and a country like Somalia. Imagine when you go to a dump site, and in addition to the polythene bags, there are also weapons in there. Some of them may be explosives. And, you know, there's a risk here that it's not only going to affect the environment, it's also going to affect humanity. So protecting the environment is not just about, you know, saving us from what we are afraid of, which is climate change, but it's also about saving lives. And so we're going to take two questions. Okay. All right, we're going to take one at the back over there. And yes. Quick questions. Keep them brief, please. Let's start with you.
Okay, my name is Kennedy from Kenya. I volunteer for an organization called Environmental Conservation Society in Kenya. I want to commend Hassan for that very elaborate presentation. For many of us, we understand the environment in Somalia, so it's really commendable that he has been able to come up with such. So one of the things that I got from your presentation is what you've called lack of political commitment and also very low levels of awareness on environmental care by the community. So, and further, you've also mentioned the interventions that you're planning to do. So what I wanted to know from you, is it, does the lack of political commitment include lack of what I would call an environmental policy in Somalia, and particularly to the youth? Because also within the community, lack of community awareness, I want to believe that the youth are mentioned in there. So as CIEP, maybe I would advise that as you move forward, and as you move forward with your interventions, maybe you could think of coming up or, prioritizing, pushing or advocating for environmental policy with a particular particular focus with the youth so that they can come on board and you can have the government backing you up, because for me, out of the presentation, I've really noticed that the lack of policy is one of the setbacks that maybe the entire Somalia communities is experiencing. So maybe you could prioritize that so that you could also make your work easier, having the government by your side, so that you can also be able to pull the other people to your side. Otherwise, thank you so much, and we are behind you. Kudos and keep up the good job. Thank you, brother.
Second one.
Plastic bags, yes, there are big problems, yes, there are solutions. Big problems when we did the evaluation of the 2006 drought response and the 2011 drought response. In the place where there were destocking sites for animals, 1 out of 3 had the belly full of plastic bags they ingested. And this is, of course, limiting the resilience, their capacity to absorb limited food and water. So it was a big problems in the capacity to resist the drought and increase the mortality. So yes, there are problems. Yes, there are solutions. The center of Timbuktu in Mali has been partly rehabilitated by blocks made of melted plastic bags and sand. So there are technologies, very simple, very cheap, that can help its income generation. So this is an area to be explored. My last point, if I may, I would advise that you introduce in your curriculum research and studies on the humanitarian impact of aid, humanitarian aid. We did with UNEP and OCHA in 2006-2007 series of studies, and there are training materials online for you students on the humanitarian impact of the environmental impact of aid. This is something we have not yet discussed, and this is something we will probably touch at a stage. But this is also something where the humanitarian community can demonstrate its capacity to be exemplary in this approach to environment by showing that they apply those principles to themselves. And it's not necessarily more costly, not necessarily more time consuming. And Somalia is a place where many aircraft with pollution, many big generators with pollution can be replaced by sometimes solar, by many options. So I think this is an area where I think Somalia can be leading in exploring issues. Thank you.
All right, so those were not particularly questions. I should take those as comments or recommendations. So thank you so much, Halif. We do appreciate. Halif Hassan Dauma is the Environmental Officer, Office for Environmental Affairs, the Federal Government of Somalia. Now, of course, he will also be around in case you want to interact with him. Just make sure you can actually reach him. Sure, we're going to have a lunch break, which is about an hour long, so you can have time to interact with him on a one-on-one level. Now, our photographer, Natalie, over there is going to be interacting with you as well. In case she seeks your permission to be featured in one of her videos, please say yes. Environmentalists never say no, unless we are actually fighting for our environment. So I'm going to hand you over to Hannah, who is going to give us some more house rules before we can break off for lunch. Thank you.
Thanks, Joy. Good afternoon, everyone. I won't keep you too long. We just have a few quick announcements. We will do a more detailed house rules admin session just after we get back from lunch. First of all, thank you so much to Joy, all our high-level people for today, and thank you all for coming from all over the world with over 60 countries represented. As many of you know, my name is Hannah, and I've been helping organize this event at the UN Environment OCHA Joint Unit in Geneva in collaboration with our colleagues here at UN Environment in Nairobi. So for those of you who have popped into our opening day today, because you work on the compound and you've managed to skip security as well as our registration desk, please do come see me, because we would really like to add you to our list, send you photos, the outcome document, and keep you on our list for future such events. So do come and sign up with me, and I can also give you a folder if you haven't already received one. Second thing is we will be taking a group photo outside right now just before lunch break, and we have Natalia over here who is our photographer. We are going to take it on the staircase as you're heading up towards the main lobby. So we will be collecting on the stairs, so please group together. Natalia will be outside to help guide you. We also have interns stationed outside the door over here and towards the stairs, so please do follow their instructions. We'll get together as quickly as we can and take the group photo. And we will be starting back here at 2 p.m. sharp for our next session. So please ensure that you are back here for 2 p.m. Please do take all your belongings with you as you're leaving this room. And after the photo, we will have lunch outside, which is already set up in the same area where you had your coffee break. So thank you all very much, and we'll see you at 2 p.m. Thank you.
I'll get it to security and then